my name is Mandip Sahota. I'm really pleased to be here today with Norah and Stefanie and you all. So over the last week, I've been preparing this talk, fretting about it. It's my first TED talk, and I discovered this really great new word, topophilia. Now, I'm assured by Google that's the way you say it, because with my Bradford brain, I want to say topophilia, but I'm sure it's not. So topophilia, look it up. It's a great noun that means a love of a place. And that's what our focus of our talk is about today, our love of this place, Bradford, and its mills. Because like many of you, Bradford's mills are part of my journey and my story. My parents moved here in the 1960s to work in Bradford's mills, and my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, and my parents all worked in them. As a child, I played in the shadows in Bradford 2, 3, and 4. As a teenager, I went to school not 5 minutes away from here. And I used to spend my Saturday mornings looking for Prince records at the Wool Exchange, if anybody remembers the record fairs they used to have there. And then as an adult, when I returned to Bradford, I was working in Little Germany for a number of years at a design company. But one mill in particular connected me 2 years ago with Norah and Stefanie, and that's Black Dyke Mills in Queensbury. Now, those of you who are unfamiliar with Queensbury, and I must admit, I didn't know it that well myself at the time, it's a village right between Bradford and Halifax, perched on a hill, so it's difficult to get to in the winter, but it's perched right there on a hill, 1,100 feet above sea level. So as you can imagine, there's some great views around the surrounding countryside. And Norah, Stefanie, and I have got together and we started working and volunteering on a project to use an underused space in this mill, just there, the heritage venue, to turn the space into a dynamic heritage hub. We wanted to do this because we wanted to preserve the stories of mill workers. Because as you've heard today, unlike the stories that you see in the media, we think Bradford's story is one of coexistence. Families like ours from Albania, from Ireland, from India, used to work together in these mills. They contributed to the success and economy of Bradford when it was known as the wool workshop of the world, the wool capital of the world. So we wanted to preserve these stories, and we thought what better way than using something that actually doesn't really need a language, that can unite generations, can unite different cultures, and that's textiles and our textile heritage. And we wanted to help young people to create that heritage and to help them create that heritage and make it their own. So this is the story, our story, of three people and a place that that is called Queensbury. Norah, I'm going to turn to you in a second, sorry. So one of the first things we've discovered along that journey is that people need places. Sounds really simple. Of course we need places. But actually, in the last few years, we're at real risk of losing these places, these buildings and places that connect us, from libraries and youth centres to parks, pubs and post offices. We're losing our spaces. In the last 9 years in Bradford, Historic England published a statistic that we've had 100 fires at Bradford's mills. So we need to find new ways to celebrate, to use and protect our buildings and the places, our social infrastructure that connects us. And what better way than our mills? They were the original connectors. Mill owners, as you know from Saltaire and from John Foster, who built this mill, they didn't just build a place to work, they built a community. So that place became life. They built houses, the mill, churches, schools, leisure facilities. So in Victoria Hall, they had swimming facilities in Queensbury. But when, in the last few years, mills have declined, so has life, so has a sense of place, and so has a sense of identity. In the last few years, a number of projects that we've been working on in Queensbury, and Norah in particular, have helped to reverse that trend and help restore a sense of place in Queensbury. And Norah here will share them. Yeah, I will take it. Good.
So, we're all here because of this stuff. This comes from the alpaca, and Black Dyke Mills specialised in producing textiles from alpaca fibres. these young people here have been involved in a project called Weaving Stories. And you can say that two ways. You can say weaving stories, or you can say weaving stories. The previous speakers have picked up on themes which absolutely weave in to what we're trying to do in Queensbury. We've talked about wool, we've talked about water, we've talked about strands, and all those things are what matter in creating the sense of belonging that Omar feels so strongly about. And these young people absolutely must maintain and develop that sense of belonging, we feel. So what they've been doing is been having a look at our textile heritage and looking at the story behind Blackdyke Mills. And they've used some really innovative ideas. So they've been looking at the machinery in the mills, and you can see on the cushions, which they themselves designed and printed and sewed and sold. And if you have a look at the designs, these designs are digitally enhanced photographs of the machinery that we went to visit in the Bradford Industrial Museum. So they're using their own use and understanding and imagination of digital technology to look at our industrial technology and create something really quite unique. These young people are really looking at the beginnings of their careers, and we want them to feel this sense of belonging. We've talked about looking up when we discover where we are in Bradford, in our landscape, but we also need to look down. And the next slide is something that also belongs to Queensbury. Under the hill of Queensbury, and as Mandip said, Queensbury is up at 1,100 feet above sea level, but underneath it is this fantastic legacy of our industrial heritage, which wouldn't have been there without the Blackdyke Mills, because what the mill owners needed was coal, the raw materials for their production process, and of course the people who they had to bring to work in the mills. Queensbury Tunnel is poised and waiting for Bradford to develop its sense of place. It's a tunnel which is nearly 1.5 miles long, and it's waiting to connect communities of Bradford with communities of Halifax, and eventually in the development of the cycle trail, which we hope will go through it, to Keighley. And here we are talking about sustainability. We need to think very, very seriously about using our industrial power and using our imaginative power to move forward into sustainable ways of connecting communities and growing communities. So our vision for this cold, damp, dark tunnel is to transform it into a cycle route, a walking route, an art gallery, a music venue, you name it. We've got to think ahead of all the wonderful ways in which our industrial heritage and what the mills have given us can lead on to.
It's not on, is it? It's me and the microphones, I think. So thank you, Norah, for sharing that. And I would recommend, if anybody wants to learn more about the tunnel, just to go on their website. They do have a website with a video that really gives you a great impression of what we could have. And it's, I think, is it going to be the longest cycle path in...
This could be the longest underground cycle route in England,
yes,
folks.
It's really exciting to have in Bradford and Halifax. So I think we all need to get behind it. So people need places. And if we do, places need architects. And this is one of the things that I've really discovered on this project, actually. I've worked on a lot of social cohesion projects. And the interesting thing is architects are generally missing on them. And I don't know why. In this project, we brought in Stefanie because I really wanted to visualize what we were going to do with the space at the mill. And what we discovered is so much more, is that architects, or as you know, I might call Stefanie a building whisperer, they listen to the space, and what she's been able to come up with is something so much more than we ever thought. And so Stefanie's here to share that.
Can you hear me okay? I have that technological breakdown. So mills have always been as a product of incredible innovation, and Bradford has always been a city of innovation, as we've heard previously. but they can also inspire innovation as well. And any sort of industrial building, really, whether it's a workshop or a garage or some old factory at the end of the street, there's something about these sort of industrial buildings that inspire innovation in you. And I think, as a rule, as an architect, I think it's really important to take time to listen to the building, whatever building that might be, in this case, Black Dyke Mills. And I'm looking at you, prospective clients in the audience, because you don't give enough time for this, and you might find you're doing yourself a massive disservice. And I also spend a lot of time telling my construction students, who are generally off to be builders, that take the time to listen to the building, and they look at me like I'm absolutely mental. But we get there and then with them, and they do see the light at the end. It just takes a little while with them. What I mean by that, and I think Irina will absolutely see where I'm coming from with this, is plans and elevations are incredibly important. You do need to understand the volume and what you're dealing with, and whether or not there's damp or all sorts of mundane things like that. But it's also incredibly important just to sit and listen and look at the building and go, look at that little quirky little area over there, and what does that mean? And look at the way the light comes over and over here, and how does that make you feel? Yes, it's got the practicalities of, yes, can you see because of the lighting, but how does that space make you feel? What do you think that space could do? And what that often happens is it expands your brief enormously, and you end up adding to the brief, the building suggesting ideas to the brief that makes the brief so much more stronger and diverse and dynamic that you never imagined was possible. And that's very much what happened at Black Dyke. Oh no. Let's go back. So there we go. So this is the current layout at the moment. It's in the basement of the mill. It's you literally come down the tunnel, and this bit here which says venue, that's kind of doing its own thing. It's Norah and her team have got it all sewn up. It just needs a little bit of tweaking and just a little bit of sorting out. But generally, as a space, works as a venue. But when you come in, you come down this long sort of space. We called it a gallery. It just goes on forever. Then you've got this kind of area of desolation at the bottom, which it feels a bit creepy in a way when you're down there, but it's kind of ripe for development. And it's just taking the time to think, as I was drawing up a proposed plan, is what could happen in this space? Because at the moment it could be anything, and I wasn't asked to. I just wanted to think, well, how best can we use this space? After really thinking about it and really trying to understand the narrative of the building, again, I'm looking at you clients, giving us the time to do this, understanding what a building was used for, what happened there, who worked there, who lived there, who did great things there, who did really mundane things, can help inspire what could happen next. And I started really thinking about this and putting together an idea for like an industrial library, a place where people could gather as part of this social hub that Norah and her team was establishing, that looked at different machinery, looked at materials, what materials were made, what the differences between them, different colours, different textures, different patterns. Could you borrow some of those materials? Could you sew them? Could you borrow a machine there? And just bring together a bit of a textile hub, which actually Bradford doesn't have, which is pretty shocking, bearing in mind Bradford is the home of textiles, and it's the thing that defines Bradford and the whole entire West Riding. And that wouldn't have happened if, as an architect, given the time and space to have a think and listen to the building. So this is a sort of kind of the vague sort of kind of idea behind it, really. When we became a bit of a victim of our own success, because then we showed this to Paul, who owns the mill. He said, we've got this really great idea, and we're going to do all this, and it all works, and we've got the business plan, we can get funding, it all works together. And he goes, that's brilliant. We like it so much, we want to give you a different part of the mill and not the mill that you're in. And we're like, oh, we've just spent ages working all this out over here. But okay. So he's going, right, so over here, we've got this other space. So, and that's where we're at now, so I can't show you any pictures of that. Because we can't seem to go any further forward because we have too many ideas. And so we've now got this other space which is bigger and better, so we think, great, we're going to make an even better venue. We're going to be a bigger industrial library. And it means we can expand on our ideas. And so we now need to go to this space and go, right, what can that space tell us? And before we know it, we'll have come up with another idea, which will lead to more further opportunities. Part of what we were trying to say as a group up on the stage today was what we've learned, and what maybe you can take away, clients, is you have a very key triangle. And it's very much about you have the business and the funding and the kind of the brief, and you've got the idea of the heritage. In this case, it's the heritage of the mills, but you apply what you will. And the way it sits within the community and how it all knits together. And then you have the building. And quite often, the parts of that will come away. And so you will have a great idea, have a great brief, but you can't necessarily shove that in any building. It will work, I'm sure it will work, but I think you're missing a trick. Because actually, if you bring the building team on board at the same time as the business team and the community team, you might find yourself opening up whole new opportunities, whole new funding streams that you didn't realise was possible. So it all works absolutely in balance, and there's a flexibility on conversation between the three from the very, very beginning. And to kind of summarise, it was this team, and if you're building your own teams, trying to find that balance, that triangular balance, it's meant that we've released and realised some quite startling possibilities for Black Dyke Mills that could spread along the whole mills, and how it really is something special for Queensbury as well. So I guess to summarise, it's having a balanced, important team on board with any of your projects is the way to maybe start reinvigorating Bradford's mills. Thank you.